brand new year starting in just a few hours. So I thought it was appropriate that we'd have a lesson this evening, or this morning if we had chose not to be here this evening, but a
We're
lesson.
fixing to get this lesson today.
Yeah, we're getting it tonight. But
Period.
we'll talk about something that'll help us, I hope, through the coming year. To encourage us to wait for God, to be patient, and not to be anxious for things. You know, there's a very slight difference between anxiety in the sense of worrying about something and really something that you have no control over, something you can't do anything about, and urgency where there's something that needs to be done and you can do it, and not to procrastinate, put it off till tomorrow, but just go ahead and get it done. Don't worry about it either way. One way you can't do anything about it. The other one, if you're going to worry about it, is worrying about being lazy, right? Because you just don't get out there and do what you need to do. It has been a long time, in my opinion, that our nation has had such an opportunity for peace and prosperity coming into a new year. I just feel that way. For several years, probably for the last 20, almost 30 years, everything's been so down. Everything's been so troubling out there in the world. And yes, there's still troubling things around us, but it just feels like things are picking up to the point where people are just giving a collective sigh of relief that things are going to get better and our lives are going to get better. Maybe the darkness is past and there'll be some good times for us ahead. Well, I want to look on this sense of not being anxious about something, but recognizing urgencies to get things done and to do them. But what does the Bible tell us? What message does God have for us about just waiting for God, giving Him the opportunity to go before us and prepare the way and to take care of us like He said He would? Well, the Bible often speaks of people being impatient with God. And you get to the point, well, where is God? You know, where is He? Why isn't He doing something about this? And, you know, most of the time God is doing something about it. It's just on His time scale, the way He wants it done, the way He sees it needs to be done, and most importantly, best for us in the way that it's going to be carried out. Where is He when we need Him? We got problems in our lives and the pressure gets to us sometimes. It gets hard to bear. So we wonder where the blessings of God that He's promised us are. You know, when's He really going to do it? And the Bible speaks more about man's impatience with God than God doing anything really to try to frustrate us, to make us anxious. God does not tempt anyone. God cannot be tempted, and He doesn't tempt anyone, but God will certainly test us to see if we're going to be faithful, to see if we will take His word and trust Him to do the things that are right. The Bible speaks of the impatience of people, even God's people. The Revelation chapter 6, verses 9 and 10 talks about the martyrs. The martyrs, closer to God than what we are anxious to a degree. When, oh Lord, are you going to take vengeance on these people who have harmed us, who have caused us to be martyrs? So there's kind of a hurry up and do something, God. You know, time might run out for us, but, you know, the martyrs ought to be able to see that, you know, in the position that they are, that, hey, God's got wonderful things here. Don't worry about your enemies. You know, we don't have to worry about our enemies. They certainly don't have to worry about them, because they passed on to a better existence. The Apostle Peter talks to us about patience as one of the Christian graces. 1 Peter chapter 1 and verse 6. Patience is something that must be found in our lives. We have to be a patient people. And I know it's kind of a slippery term that, how much patience is patience? And, can we be over patient to the point of indulging ourselves and failing to accomplish things? Let's just look at some examples tonight of patience in the Bible, particularly the Old Testament, and then look at an Old Testament example of someone who really waited on God and someone who can be such a help to us. Well, the Bible gives us these examples of patience. You think about Noah. Noah waited 100 years for the flood. Now, all the time he was building the ark, he was getting his family prepared, and he was preaching to the people around him, hey, God's going to destroy the world with a flood. And they didn't even know what a flood was. We have no evidence that it had rained upon the earth up to that point in time. Things were totally different then. You and I, can't even, well, we could probably imagine, but not really know for certain what the world looked like back then. Just the way that those people couldn't know what the world looked like for Adam and Eve, because there were changes that took place. From Adam and Eve being driven out of the Garden of Eden, the world became a different place for them. And then for their descendants at the time of Noah, when Noah walked out of that ark, the world was totally different. And it's still different. It's still, I think, if you really look at it and study it, you see that we are living under the effects of that great flood. So, but 100 years he waited for the flood, and that's in Genesis chapter 6, verse through chapter 8. Abraham waited 25 years for the son of promise. He was about 75 years old when God made the promise that he would have a son. It's about 15 years later that Ishmael is born, but he's not the child of promise. He's not the one that God said. It's going to be from Sarah, not from this Egyptian Hagar, a bondmaid. It wasn't going to be any surrogacy. Is that a proper way to say it? Surrogacy in, producing an heir. It was going to be with Sarah, and he had to wait about another 10 years or so for Isaac, for that child of promise. And did he worry about it? I don't know that he worried about it. Was he anxious about it? He was at first, right? But after that, it was kind of like, I'm sure it was on his mind, but yet he wasn't going to worry about it. He knew that God would take care of and bring forth his promise. Think about Jacob. Here's a guy that worked 7 years almost as a slave in order to have a wife. And he loved Rachel. He wanted to marry Rachel, but on his wedding night, the next morning, he kind of wakes up to find out that his father-in-law has given him Leah as a wife and not Rachel. And he's kind of upset about that. And he makes a bargain then. He gets Rachel, but he has to work 7 more years, okay, to kind of pay her off, He gets her immediately, but, it's 7 years. Now think about Rachel and Leah in those circumstances. There's Rachel. She knows that Jacob loves her, and comes what's supposed to be her wedding night, and she doesn't get to enjoy that so much because Leah's given. But think of that patience. How many people wait 7 years? How many people, man and woman, get engaged and wait 7 years to get married? You hear of it happening, but it's just not the normal thing. Well, Jacob, knew what he wanted. And for him, 14 years basically to have Rachel and to have a family with her, that was his goal. But think of the patience that he had to have, and the way that Laban treated him, cheated him so many times, and at the end, he ran and basically was running for his life to get away from Laban. Children of Israel, remembered the promise of Abraham. It was passed on to Isaac and then to Jacob and on down to the 12 sons of Israel. 400 years their descendants lived in Egypt, waiting for that promise to come true. We can't imagine 400 years, can we? No, just can't. But there it is, you know, and that's one of the things people talk about in the United States. We want instant gratification. We want problems solved right now, and we want our way right now. But some of the Oriental people, they're willing to wait generations for something to happen, for their goals to be reached. And, you know, we've got to be aware of that type of a mindset, develop that a little bit, but, you know, it's what we teach our children that becomes so important in maintaining culture and being able to survive and to keep those promises alive, the looking for, or the hope, keep the hope alive. Well, what the Bible tells us is God turns our struggles into victories, and there's no greater place of understanding that, really, I think, than Psalm 40, the 40th Psalm. David's an example of someone who waited on the Lord, and what he does, he records what has happened and what's going on in his life. And I think that's kind of an example for us, and especially as we head into the future, and especially a future that looks so promising for our nation and hopefully for each and every one of us. But we shouldn't be anxious. We shouldn't be anxious about what's going on, and we should just simply wait for God to bring about His good will in our lives. One thing that we know, God hears our cries in due time. God hears our cries in due times, and then therefore God turns our struggles into victories. Struggles into victories. The things that we struggle with are no problem for God.
Amen.
He can take care of them, but He's going to do it in His way. The first verse, Psalm 40, David writes, I patiently waited for the Lord. He inclined to me and heard my cry. He inclined to me. You know, that kind of means He leaned in to listen. Remember that old E.F. Hutton commercial? Somebody says E.F. Hutton, and everybody goes like that. And that's what God does. God knows in our struggles, and God's waiting for us to ask Him to help. And when we ask, wait a minute, I'm going to pay attention here. I got a child that's asking for something. I want to listen. I want to pay attention. And that's the way that God works in our lives. He wants to hear from us. I know we all want to hear from our children, grandchildren. We just do. So here, God wants to hear from us. He wants us to have a conversation with Him going on most of the time. Sometimes it gets down into that formal prayer where we actually bow before Him as a king and beg of Him for the things that we need in our lives, things that we want in our lives, just turning it over to Him. Well, faith in God changes where we stand in life. Faith in God will take away that anxiety and turn it into, if necessary, a desire to get the things accomplished that we can. You know, worrying about something usually drags us down where if we do what we can do about it, and we're trying to solve the problem, it gives us energy. Do you ever find that? You get energized and you get something done, then you're ready to rest, okay? But that's the sweet rest that comes after getting a task accomplished. Faith in God changes where we stand in life. We're not here on our own. Yes, we've got family, we've got friends, we've got brothers and sisters in church to help, but yet further than that, we've got God on our side. We've got God as our helper. Our King is our helper. Verse 2, He drew me up from the pit of destruction, out of the miry bog. Did you ever get stuck in the mud? That's a tough deal. You need some help to get out of the mud when you get stuck in the mud. And setting my feet upon a rock, making my steps secure. You can walk around on a rock, a flat. There you go up on Black Mesa. You can get up on top of there. You can walk around. It's flat and all. But you get down those creeks. If you get into the mud, you're stuck. You just don't go very fast. You're trot, and it's heavy because the mud sticks to your boots, and you're pulling extra weight and everything. God takes us out of that place there where we get anxious about where we are and what we're accomplishing, and makes it worthwhile. Gets us up there on the flat plain, up there on the rock where it's kind of flat and level, and just you can make a good steady pace of advancement. He makes our steps secure. Yeah. Walking out here this morning, say, got out of the car, come around. I didn't go down the slope. I walked over and around and took a step down. I just didn't feel comfortable going down that slope. Well, why is that? If there was some ice there, I know where I'd have landed, and it would have hurt. Okay? So, we understand that God helps to make our footsteps secure. Faith in God changes our attitude about life. You ever know somebody that's just nothing's good enough, nothing's suitable enough, everything's a problem, everything's a burden? This is too loud, this is too soft, that's too salty, that's too sweet, just everything. There's never a calmness about the individual to where they're satisfied with anything in life. God changes our attitude about life. One of the great things that we can know is that life changes. Things just change around us, and what's the old saying? Variety is the spice of life. There's a lot of different things. Today we watched 2 episodes of Longmire, and then turned off the TV and put in Karen's new, is it Pentatonics? I think that's how you pronounce it. But Jeremy got Karen that for Christmas, a 2 CD set. Put one of those in and just kind of listened to the music afterwards. What a change, see? But that's how life kind of goes. Here you got some drama and things going on. Oh, what's the next episode going to be like? And then just listen to the voices just singing and harmony that goes on. It's kind of really peaceful. Verse 3, He, that's God, put a new song in my mouth, a song of praise to our God. Many will see and fear and put their trust in the Lord. When we're satisfied with God and satisfied with what God is doing in our lives and willing to accept what God is doing in our lives, He puts a new song in our lives. And when others see that, then they're going to be drawn to put their trust in the Lord. I hope there are people out here that want what we have. I hope they seek it. I hope they look here, okay? I hope they're able to look at our lives and say, I'd really like to have a life like that. Not something that's satisfying, as our God is satisfying. David tells us that God's blessings are immeasurable. fact, we couldn't count all the blessings that God gives us. Well, I know we sing the song, "Count Your Blessings," right? But we just couldn't count them all. That's all we'd get done all day long, isn't it? Just counting. We'd run out of numbers eventually. Verses 4 and 5. Blessed is the man who makes the Lord his trust, who does not turn to the proud, to those who go astray after a lie. You have multiplied, O Lord my God, your wondrous deeds and your thoughts toward us. None can compare with you. I will proclaim and tell of them, yet they are more than can be told. David said, there's just not enough room. There's just not enough time to go through it all, to record it all. And the things that we don't even know about yet, that are yet to be discovered. Maybe not here in this life, but in the life to come. It's a wonderful thing right here around us. It's called air. Air is made up of hydrogen and oxygen and nitrogen and all those kinds of things in such a perfect balance that we can pretty much breathe and have life here. How did that happen? Well, God did it. God made it possible. God made this earth a place where we could live and carry out His will. Oh, we can reject Him too, but we can do His will. The anthropic principle. The world, the earth was made for man to live on. There's just no other excuse for it. Couldn't have happened by accident. God's blessings are immeasurable. They're just all around us. David qualifies this waiting for God. He says, basically, we have to be patient or have a patient obedience to God's commands. A patient obedience. See, it doesn't mean, God promised us something, so let's just go and live a life, a worldly life, a carnal, materialistic life until God's promises come true. And then we do what God says. No, it's living the life that He has set out that will lead to the fulfilling of those promises that He's made to us. Verses 6 through 10, long passage here. In sacrifice and offering you have not delighted. In other words, it's not the animal being sacrificed, brought to God that pleased God. Putting it on, killing it, putting it on the altar and all those things, burning it up, and that wasn't what God was concerned about. He was concerned with our hearts in bringing it. Because there were people who could bring a sacrifice. They could bring the best bull or the best ram or the best goat, whatever it was, the best that they had to God. But if their heart wasn't right, He wasn't pleased with that sacrifice. It wasn't the sacrifice, it was the heart of that individual. In sacrifice and offering you have not delighted, but you have given me an open ear. Burnt offering and sin offering you have not required. Then I said, behold, I have come. In the scroll of the book it is written of me, I delight to do your will, O my God. Your law is within my heart. Catch that. I delight to do your will, O my God. Your law is within my heart. I have told the glad news of deliverance in the great congregation. Behold, I have not restrained my lips, as you know, O Lord. I have not hidden your deliverance within my heart. I have spoken of your faithfulness and your salvation. I have not concealed your steadfast love and your faithfulness from the great congregation. You know what David's saying? I've told everybody about the good things that you have done for me, and the great things that have been done for me, the great things that I've accomplished. God, I've always given you the credit. God, you're the reason. You're the reason. You're the drive behind everything that I do. You're the reason for what I do, is what David is saying. In Exodus chapter 21, verses 5 through 6, this is kind of, remember, it's where the slave, if he wants to remain a slave because he loves his master's house, the master takes him out to the doorpost or the gatepost and takes an awl and punches a hole in his ear, okay, to signify that he desires to be a slave or a servant of his master because his master is good. But if the slave plainly says, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not go out free, then his master shall bring him to God, and he shall bring him to the door or the doorpost, and his master shall bore his ear through with an awl, and he shall be his slave forever. There's a song that we sang when we go to camp, Pierce My Ear. And it's a song that says, God, I'm so happy with you as my master. I'm so happy as a slave to you. Just pierce my ear. I always want to be your slave. That's what that patient obedience to God's command means. We understand what he wants, and we try, as a slave would do for his master, especially one who's loved, willing to do his will, a desire to do it, and to speak well of his master to others. Another part of this waiting on God, the patient, obedient waiting of God of David allowed God to take vengeance upon his enemies, thus preserving David's righteousness before God. You know, when we choose to take vengeance on somebody, we usually do it the wrong way, and we end up sinning. Or if we just wait and let God do it, God will take care of it, but he'll do it in his time, in his righteousness, and we don't lose our righteousness, we don't sin. And David come to understand that. Verses 11 through 15. As for you, O Lord, you will not restrain your mercy from me. Your steadfast love and your faithfulness will ever preserve me. For evils have encompassed me beyond number. My iniquities have overtaken me, and I cannot see. They are more than the hairs of my head. My heart fails me. Be pleased, O Lord, to deliver me. O Lord, make haste to help me. Let those be put to shame and disappointed altogether who seek to snatch away my life. Let those be turned back and brought to dishonor who delight in my hurt. Let those be appalled because of their shame who say to me, aha, aha. In other words, aha, we got him. I think I've told you all the story before about the man who come into the gas station we owned and had a tire. I hadn't done it completely right, and boy, he was on me, just on me, and so I broke the tire down, did it up, aired it up right, got it right, and gave it to him and said, there it is. He said, I got your goat. And he did. He said, yeah, it's basically, I know where your goat's tied up, I'm going to get it. And he did. But it taught me a lesson, see? You know, what I did was wrong. But him being on me and saying things, that didn't help any. But it all turned out okay. And you know, we got along fine after that. That was the main thing. So there are people who do things like that not to encourage us, not just in teasing, but lots of times to hurt and to drag us down and to get us to lose our cool and to get us to blow up and sin. And we've got to be careful. That patient obedience, allows God to take the vengeance. And as we close, David speaks of the realities of faith in God. the realities of faith. Faith is such a nebulous thing. It's kind of out there, and sometimes it means different things to different people, but our faith, our trusting in God, see, there's a reality to it in our lives. It's just not something we say, well, I have faith in God. It's actually something that our lives show, and our lives give testimony to others. Verses 16 and 17, but may all who seek you rejoice and be glad in you. May those who love you, love your salvation, say continually, great is the Lord. As for me, I am poor and needy. That's that humble effect. But the Lord takes thought for me. You are my help and my deliverer. Do not delay, O my God. The realities of faith. At my very best, I am poor and needy. In spirit, physically, all those ways. Here, where life is so fragile, where life is just a breath away. See, there's just a breath between life and death. It's not much. We're frail. I'm frail. The realities of faith in God, that's what makes us strong. That's what keeps us going. That's what gives us the hope that the promises of God of peace and prosperity in the face of all the bad things that happen to us in this fallen world, we have a hope. We have a God who cares so very much for us. I hope and pray that 2018 is the best year of our lives. Okay? And I'll say the same thing next year, Lord willing. 2019 will be the best also, because that's what we've got to look forward to. The past is over. 2017 is going to be a goner. It's over. Let's make next year the best. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. The lesson is yours.